Hello and welcome. My name is Arnar Þór Jónsson, and I am sitting here with Mary Holland, who is the president of Children's Health Defence. And this is being recorded in Reykjavik, Iceland. Mary has honored us with her presence here as we are forming a new chapter, an Icelandic chapter. So, Mary has been so kind as to join me here for this recording. We are just going to go over the situation as it now stands, the world view as it appears to us now at the end of 2023. And I just to start this off, Mary, and thank you for joining me here. It is much appreciated.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
I'm just honored to be here with you. Just so that I say that. And Mary, so these times that we have been living through have been quite challenging for what we could call the liberal, the Western liberal democratic tradition. So I guess the public is coming to terms slowly with what has happened. And it may be, I mean, it's difficult for most people to see this in perspective. And I'm hoping that our conversation here can help listeners to get a clearer and a broader picture of what we are looking at and sort of what are the underlying currents, if we could call it that. Where do they come from? And where are they trying to steer us if we don't do anything? So I would like perhaps to start off with your view on this and how you sort of came into this this work that Children's Health Defence is doing. The situation as it looks to me in Iceland is that we've been living through a time of censorship, and we have also been living through a time of non-debate and a single source of truth from the government, apparently, things that we have not been allowed to doubt, not been allowed to discuss or debate. So a lot of issues that we have to untangle here, political and legal issues. And I think it would be refreshing for our Icelandic listeners to hear your voice, which is so clear, and you have such a good overview. So I'm hoping we can somehow manage to sum it up in this discussion. So where should we kick it off? Perhaps with with what we have seen with the censorship and all of that?
Sure. So, as you said, the last 3 years have been very challenging. And one of the dimensions that's so striking is it's been so challenging worldwide. Literally, the whole global human population was propagandized and censored, really to induce fear, deep-seated fear of death from COVID. And the truth is that COVID was not a terribly deadly disease. It really only affected in a severe way people who were already compromised or very elderly. But the fear was propagated on everyone. And as you point out, liberal democracies are intended to have a marketplace of ideas, have everyone be able to express their idea, and have people be able to hear differing ideas, and to let the best decisions come to the top. That's the whole premise of parliamentary or legislative democracy, that there is a clash of ideas and the best one comes to the top. And so over the last 3 years, this notion that there's no debate, the government's right, You have to obey the government. Any other voice is disinformation or misinformation or malinformation. We've never seen this before in our democratic traditions. These are features of extreme dogmatic religions, and they're features of totalitarian governments. And if we don't do anything to preserve our rights to democratic processes and debate and science, if we don't act to preserve those things, they will disappear.
Yes, you sum it up beautifully. I mean, this goes against just the core of our democratic societies, the core of science, the core of just, what we would call the liberal tradition, the ability to be able to have concerns, raise your voice, shall we say, to make yourself heard in a disciplined manner, and then to be able to criticize, right, the powers that be, and that has all been challenged, and we could use the word, perhaps it's been attacked by the authorities in the past few years, and it's been a global thing, as you say.
It has, and these have attacked the values that the whole world community has embraced through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In the United States, literally, the U.S. Constitution was suspended for 3 years. Our most essential rights of free expression of religion, the ability to go to church, was suspended. The ability to speak your mind was suspended. The ability to connect with other people was suspended. The ability to go to court was suspended. The ability to file grievances with the government that they would look at was suspended. Literally, in the United States, the world suspended for an extended period of time. And among other things, this caused an enormous wealth transfer away from Main Street to mega global corporations.
So that the small and medium businesses suffered. The middle class has suffered. And this has happened through what we could say is the money printing that went on. This is the massive inflation that was caused by the money printing, and the forced closures that took place in many countries. That the small and medium businesses were forced to close, but the bigger corporations were allowed to continue, right? Was that?
Yes, absolutely. They were considered essential, and non-essential personnel were laid off. And the middle class over the last several centuries has been the bulwark. It has been the foundation for liberal democracy. When we get rid of a middle class and have only the uber oligarchs and then the peasants, that is not a recipe that is hospitable to liberal democracy. There's just not enough equality in the population to make that really functional.
Yeah. So it's what we're looking at is possibly a threat to the civil society that we have been, grown to think were the bulwark of everything that we know of the human rights. I mean, these are the people that were likely to protect, shall we say, property rights, etc. So they're being hung out to dry, almost, the middle class, and they're being told to shut up. So, just looking back, we seek, and I think everyone by now seeks some explanation. How did this happen? What are the forces? I mean, are we looking at? Is this in plain sight? What is going on? Is this done by lobbyism or what? What are the explanations as it seems to you, as it looks to you, Mary?
Well, I completely agree that it's crucial that we look at what happened. We don't want this to happen again.
Right.
Great harm was done to our societies, to our economies, and to our health.
Yeah.
But I understand people who don't want to look at this right now. It was very traumatic, and it's very human not to want to look at something that was traumatic and just to say it's over, thank God, I'm moving on.
Mm-hmm.
The challenges that we faced in the last 3 years are unlikely to be over. We are facing forces of these mega global corporations and what appear to be supranational coordinating bodies. The World Economic Forum, in particular, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, they are striving to become much more powerful right now. They are articulating very clear plans that are on the agenda in 2024 to create a kind of global health enterprise that could literally take over almost every facet of human civilization. They talk about One Health, which is intended to be health of humans, health of animals, and health of the planet, of the plants. So there are efforts under the guise of One Health and the World Health Organization and a revised treaty that they want to sign in 2024 under the guise of United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and under the guise of the World Economic Forum's Great Reset, where their goals have been set for 2030. There is every reason to believe that the assault on our liberal democratic tradition and on our individual rights is going to continue. So it's very important that we look at what just happened in the last 3 years. And the central lever that we can see worldwide was the inducement of fear.
Yes.
If we do not fall for the fear, we are in an infinitely stronger position. But fear was the core weapon that was used.
Right, and perhaps because the governments, they sort of monopolized the media, so we had mostly just one point of view, and the checks and balances. I mean, if we talk about the Republic, I guess they failed in the States and they failed certainly here in Iceland. But the checks and balances that we have within the science and within democracy, they were also sort of taken away by clamping down on free speech. Because when you take away, like within the science, the possibility of normal, healthy criticism, we're in trouble. If you take away the possibility of normal, healthy criticism within the democracy and within the parliaments even, then we're in trouble as well. And we're on a path towards some sort of totalitarianism, I would call it.
I think that's right. Children's Health Defense existed before COVID, and we worked extensively with physicians and in doctors trying to focus on why were children so unhealthy. Over half of American children have some kind of serious chronic health condition. But once COVID came, we felt compelled to push back against this censorship. Doctors, scientists, Nobel Prize winners that we worked with were being censored. They were being muzzled when they said, we think there's a problem with how you're describing COVID. We think there's a problem with the treatments that you're prescribing. We think there's a problem with the treatments that you're overlooking. And these doctors and scientists who are not political, these are not political issues historically, they were being absolutely, their license were taken away. They were told they could not speak out. Their hospitals or their universities fired them. This is deeply disturbing. Science and medicine should not be political. But in addition, political actors were censored. And millions of people in the United States who, on religious grounds or on personal grounds, did not want to take the shots, in particular the COVID shots, millions of people lost their jobs.
Well, of course, I mean, everyone looking back should be able to see how serious this was. And just from a medical perspective, I would think that everyone can understand that, let's say, a drug or a treatment, is not cannot be useful for everyone. But that's how it was put forward. You know, we have one sort of miracle drug that everyone has to take. And we don't care how old you are, you know, how your health is, or you know, whatever. You just, this is compulsory and you better take it. So that was sort of the line. And I would think this cannot be good medical practice.
Our normal medical concepts were turned on their head. Mm-hmm. It is standard medicine that once you've had an infection, you have immunity. And yet in the United States, there was no recognition that there was natural immunity. Right. People who had already had COVID, if they were subject to a mandate, they were forced to take the shots again. Mm-hmm. People who had often severe adverse reactions to a first shot felt that they had to take the second or the third shot, often causing severe lifelong injuries or death. Mm-hmm. Everything about, I was just listening to Dr. Michael Yeadon, who was in the pharmacological development industry for his whole career. He was a vice president at Pfizer, and he was saying how it was impossible to develop a novel medical product the way that was developed within that short period of time. Mm-hmm. It was under 12 months. Mm-hmm. He said the closest that anyone had ever come to something similar was 6 years. Mm-hmm. So everything about that as a medical procedure mm-hmm. was off. Right. It was just off. And we could go and speak a lot about that, but there was nothing about that from a medical perspective that made sense. Another example, just a simple one, is people around the world were told when you have early symptoms of being sick, of some kind of respiratory illness, don't seek help. Stay at home until you get really sick. We've never been told advice like that. Basic remedies that hospitals would always use against inflammation, they were told they couldn't use them. Yeah. Everything about this was off.
Yeah, I agree. And the point that you mentioned, just the censorship, the way that we have seen our trusted professions in effect fail us with being so compliant to the powers that be, is that you would think that following such a shock to the traditions that we have seen. I mean, it's that at this point we would need just a thorough discussion. You know, we would need a healthy scientific debate on these issues. But what we're facing at the end of 2023 is mostly just silence, and we are facing, even today, censorship and still the propaganda, right? So we are in an unhealthy situation, and we have to, we have to find a way out of this, and we have, as you say, we have to find a way of avoiding repetition. We do not want this to happen again, but for that to happen, we will have to confront, I would say, the politicians. We will have to confront the scientists that led the way, and the media. This is what has to, take place.
I completely agree. One bright light in this is last week I interviewed the United Kingdom Member of Parliament, Andrew Bridgen, and he has succeeded against very significant odds to have a debate in the UK Parliament in early 2024 about the data in the UK that shows that there were extreme excess deaths after the rollout of the COVID shots. And the way that he achieved that was very interesting. He made a short video that we showed on Children's Health Defense TV about thalidomide. Thalidomide was a drug that was recommended to women during pregnancy, particularly in Europe, for nausea, for morning sickness, but it actually caused severe deformities in people. And so there was a failure of the drug regulators in Europe around thalidomide. And because it was a failure, the government institutions in Europe did not look at it. And in fact, Andrew Bridgen points out that it took 11 years for the UK to acknowledge their failure. And so he asked in this public forum, is it going to take 11 years for us to look at the failures of COVID? And I'm very happy to say that other members of parliament joined with him to call for this debate. In the United States, there's been the beginnings of a reckoning with COVID, but we, the people, must hasten this along with things like this radio show, because if we don't do this reckoning now, we could fall prey to another emergency and see our fundamental rights disappear or evaporate again. And when you keep losing fundamental rights and wealth and health, it gets harder to recover. It shouldn't be that hard for us to look back at the last 3 years and see that the media, the mega corporations, the governments, the universities, many of the scientists in the medical profession, they failed us. They did. We just have to acknowledge it, and we have to see what we can do to make sure it doesn't happen again.
I completely agree. And when after I had said before that we have to take a look at what has happened and we may have to confront all of these professions and the media, etc., I thought to myself exactly what you're saying. We, the people, we will in the end have to confront ourselves, because this type of fear-mongering, it is dangerous for us to succumb to fear, as we have always known, right? This has been known from the beginning of time, that it is probably the easiest way for tyrants and for the governments to control the population is through fear. So, I mean, now that you have been looking so closely at this for such a long time, Mary, from your experience and from your insight, what would you say would be the best advice we could give to ourselves and we could give to other people? How do we, hold on? How can we withstand the propaganda? How can we see through the lies? How can we find courage to stand against the tide when it comes?
Well, I think a first step is to resist the fear. If there's propaganda that you can identify whose thrust is to make you feel afraid, you need to question that. Why are they making me feel so afraid? Who is behind that? Why would it serve their interests for me to be in fear? What is it that they want me to do? I think that's a first step, is to take that pause and not jump into those emotions immediately if possible. But that's hard. And so one of the ways to support yourself is to be with other people who are also committed to the questioning. So I'm very pleased that Children's Health Defense is, with your guidance, setting up a chapter here in Iceland. People coming together and asking questions together. Why is this happening? What is this really about? Why are they censoring my voice? Who's behind this? Who's making money on this? You can more easily do that collectively. You can more easily do that together. And that was one of the terrible things that happened over the last 3 years, is that kind of interaction was really prohibited. And perhaps that was prohibited very thoughtfully, to prohibit people from having that kind of group questioning and coming to the realization that this doesn't make sense and we should not comply. I sadly believe that many, many people around the world complied to their detriment.
Yes.
Out of fear.
Absolutely. I'm sad to say it too, but I'm so happy to hear you say this, and I think this is helpful for the listeners, is that we can find strength in one another.
Absolutely.
If we have the opportunity to stand before one another, look each other in the eye, and speak from within, and speak from the heart and outwards, instead of being put in a situation that we were in for the past few years, to be sort of under this immense pressure and being told to live from outside and in. Am I making myself understandable here? Is that the powers that be are telling us what to think, how to speak, and what drugs to take, and that this would be the correct way to live, when if we see this from the inside, from within our own consciousness and our own hearts, and we have this discussion with others and find strength in other people and in our families and in our communities, we could say, I do not believe this is the right way for me. And we would be in a stronger position to object and to doubt and to criticize and to hold meetings and, gatherings and whatever it takes, peacefully.
We have to remember that totalitarian regimes thrive when people are isolated from one another. Mm-hmm. It gives them more power. And we have to see that in the last 3 years, especially at the beginning, the global policies were to isolate individuals, to keep them 6 feet apart, not to have people in their homes, not to go to the office, not to have social gatherings. There were enormous efforts made to isolate people. If that were to happen again, mm-hmm. we must question it. Mm-hmm. It is inhuman not to associate with other humans. We are social animals. Mm-hmm. Civilization is a social organism. But I think if we start to hear these repressive messages again, we're likely to hear a message about isolation, and we should absolutely question that mm-hmm. and not comply.
Mm-hmm. And just now in the second half of our discussions, Mary, we are sitting here in Reykjavik, Iceland, and just a few years ago, we experienced, I would call it a massive shock. It was a shock. It was this financial crisis that hit us really hard. And what we did, and I don't know if many people know about this, but we set laws. We pushed through a bill through Parliament, really in the dead of night before everything crashed, saying, well, whatever happens, we will have the Icelanders, the people of Iceland, will have the last word on what money will actually be paid out of the country, who will be receiving, whatever assets are in the banks. So is there a lesson, do you think, in that for us now that we are faced with, we are in the aftermath of a second, I would call it a real democratic shock, and also a political shock that has hit our health system and everything, and we have still to deal with it. Is there anything you see that we might learn from it?
Well, I find what Iceland did in 2008 to be very laudatory, very optimistic, because your country had sovereignty, because it was independent. It was able to take local, decisive action to overcome what was a global financial crisis. So in the United States, that crisis lasted much longer. It was years of a financial depression on Main Street, and no bankers were ever prosecuted. Mm-hmm. In fact, we didn't really have adequate hearings in Congress. It was not like the crash in 1929, where people did go to prison, and there were new laws, and there were real hearings in Congress. We didn't have that, to our tremendous detriment. So I have looked to Iceland as a very positive example of what one country can do in the face of a global crisis. And so I am looking to Iceland again, and I was very inspired by the meeting that we had with your colleagues founding Children's Health Defense Iceland, that you are an autonomous country and you do have people who understand what happened over the last 3 years, and you can exercise your sovereignty and you can push back against some of these global forces. So, for example, the World Health Organization is trying in 2024 to get countries to sign onto regulations and or a treaty that would make the World Health Organization the ultimate source for health policy worldwide. That is a terrible idea. Just like an economy must be local, health decisions must be local. Iceland, with adequate information that the population can understand, can say, no, we're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. That would have a global ripple effect. Mm-hmm. I believe there are other countries. So Slovenia, another small country, has pushed back against the World Health Organization. I believe if other countries know that Iceland is going to preserve its sovereignty, not only over its economy and wealth, but also over its health, that will set an example for other countries. Mm-hmm. So I believe that Iceland's size can be a tremendous advantage. People here know another person who knows another person who knows another person. And within a very short period of time, you have reached every person on this island. Mm-hmm. I believe that you can really be effective in ways that's much harder for the European Union or for the United States with 50 states. We're slower and bigger. I think Iceland can really set the pace here and exercise common sense as you did after the financial crisis.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that gives us hope, and hopefully we will have the good sense of doing that. What do you think? What do you think would be like? We have. I will tell you, and I'm not afraid to say that on radio. We have a political class. I would say that is now. The parliamentarians we have now are fast asleep. Either they are fast asleep or they are not daring to say anything. So we have a political crisis on our hands. And we are this tiny nation here in the North Atlantic. And I see this now as basically an assault on our sovereignty that's ongoing, an assault on our human dignity that is ongoing and our freedoms. And I would so like to know and to have someone advise me on what we can do to sort of, have a clean break, have a necessary regeneration of our parliament and everything and the institutions. Do you think it's possible, or are the institutions by now, are they just so infested with this way of thinking? Are they working for the wrong boss, if we can call the global institutions their bosses? Is this the situation we're looking at?
I can't speak to Iceland. It may be that we need a much more thoroughgoing change. It's possible. But I do believe that we talked yesterday at the meeting of Children's Health Defense Iceland, and many people asked the question, how do we wake people up? Mm-hmm. How do we get people out of this trance that everything's fine and there's nothing to worry about, and COVID was perfect, and, I don't have a problem with what happened. And I think what we understand is the best way for us to wake people up, whether they're parliamentarians or our family members, is by asking questions. It's not by giving them studies. It's not by giving them books necessarily or treatises. It's by asking them questions. Do you think that there is censorship? Do you feel like there was propaganda? Do you think that the government handled the last 3 years well? Mm-hmm. Do you think that it makes sense that all of the measures that were in place over which there was so much fear are now gone. Asking people to reflect themselves is the way to get them to start asking themselves questions. I do believe that people can ask their constituents in this parliament, why aren't you calling for debates?
Yeah.
Why aren't you asking for these shots to be taken off the market? In a personal capacity, I actually saw a social media post that 17 members of the political class in the United States have called representatives in Democratic government have called for the takedown to take the vaccines off the market because they've been very injurious. So I sent that today to my congressman and I said, you should be among these 17 or 29, I forget who it was, but I sent that a direct message today to the congressman to say, you should be among those people.
Yes.
I think we have to be reaching out to these people directly and saying, what are you doing to find out the truth? What are you doing to bring us back to our democratic traditions?
Because it has shifted. Like the traditional view of this is that they are public servants. They are serving us. They are responsible for us. They are our representatives. We have representatives in government that should be responsible to us. But the situation as it seems to me now is that they do not even, like here in Iceland, they do not even respond. They do not even reply. I sent a memo, a legal opinion to every single parliamentarian in Iceland on the WHO regulations. This happened on the 30th of November. I received no response. So I asked questions to the Minister of Health. I've yet to receive any answers, but I will continue because if they continue their silence, it will not look good for them come the next election.
It will look terrible. It will look terrible. I mean, I know that it's frustrating. It's very frustrating to get no answers for long periods of time. If lots of people ask the questions, at some point they will answer.
So I like this line. I think it is from Robert Kennedy Jr. that politics is what is it? It's like, yes, law is downstream from politics. Politics is downstream from culture. So as soon as the politicians, as soon as even the officials in government sense that there is a shift that is ongoing, that will change everything, I think.
I agree.
And do you think, Mary, that now, at the end of 2023, that you sense, you told me that there had been now more politicians present during the presentations in Westminster the other day than had ever been before. You tell me that there are, 17 representatives in Congress that are active now. Would you say that in light of everything that has happened, I mean, we are seeing sad excess deaths that are, I mean, there's really no way of covering this up by now. So do you have the feeling that that this is maybe taking place now? We are seeing that there's a cultural shift.
Oh, the culture has dramatically shifted. With the propaganda and censorship, we're less aware of it. But in the United States, well under 10% of people are taking the recommended boosters. The government's still recommending boosters to everybody 6 months and up. In the United States, 24% of Americans in a poll said that they know someone personally who they believe died from a COVID shot. The culture has shifted drastically over the last few years. People, they had to stop the COVID boosters effectively. They had to stop the mandates. They had to stop the testing. I don't think those things happened out of the blue. I think they happened because there was public pressure to stop them. But I think we need to push further so that we really get some media coverage of this. The silence of the media is one of the elements, but the culture is absolutely shifting.
Yeah. So then, is it the free media that will break the ice?
Well, I think social media is working. Free media is working. The corporate media is bad.
Yeah. It's bad. I know it's bad in the U.S.
It's very bad in the
it's
U.S.
not-
It's controlled by the pharmaceutical industry. So
Is it?
we're
Yes.
not going to, I don't expect that the major networks in the United States are going to start really shifting the culture. I'm
No.
not expecting
No,
that.
it will come from elsewhere.
It will come from elsewhere, and it will
Yeah.
come in a place as small as Iceland. I think there is the opportunity for people to meet in person and people
Yeah.
to call out their direct representative. It doesn't have to be on television or social media. It can be just people.
Mary, I can tell you, and I can say that here. I offered on your behalf the Minister of Health in Iceland to meet with you. I offered the Directorate of Health to meet with you. I offered people from the media to do that, and people from the field of health in general in Iceland. And as we sit here and this conversation is drawing to a close, I ask myself, what are they afraid of hearing? What is it that Mary is saying that is so dangerous or cannot be heard or cannot be listened to or cannot be broadcast? I mean, can you give us an idea, Mary?
I think simply that probably these officials know that their policies were poor, that they were not based on science,
Yes.
that they didn't tell the truth, and
Right.
they don't want to acknowledge the problems, and they don't want to hear from somebody who says, you did a bad job.
Right.
But that's life, and if they're going to hear it one way or the other. So the last 3 years were nothing to be proud of. They were devastating globally. And we are going to have to acknowledge that as a global community, or we're in for more of the same, and it could get much worse. So we really owe it to ourselves to look back and learn the lessons and not succumb to the fear, ask questions, question authority, and not to comply if we're asked to do things again that are dangerous.
Mary Holland, I could not have phrased this better. It was beautifully put, and I want to thank you for giving us the time, and thank you for your visit. We hope that we may see you here again, and we will do our best to have improved the situation by then.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.